Good day. Today we will begin our discussion on hope. This is a commentary on Gabriel Marcel's Metaphysics and Phenomenology of Hope. This is so please sit and let's take this course lecture slowly. For those who know philosophy, Gabriel Marcel is an phenomenologist who is deeply grounded on his understanding of religious sensibilities. For that matter, you'd understand why this lecture is divided into 6 parts. One will look into the response or hope as a response. 2, it will look at hope as in relation to captivity, the inability to make sense of things on one's own. Then we will look at what hope is not before we'll try to reflect on what hope is, the understanding of despair, and even communion. So this is the outline of the presentation. Let's look at the first one. Hope is a attitude. Hope, therefore, is to be understood as a response. Therefore, it's not something that comes automatically, but something that demands an act of will, something that will necessitate a choice, which means you don't simply hope automatically as if you can do it on automatic mode. There is no such thing. In this sense, even hope is a type of choice to be made. People choose to hope. For that matter, it's an attitude. It's a response. Something happens to me, and my response to what happens to me is hope. Hope is a response, and it's a very specific response to an experience of captivity. Captivity or imprisonment, for that matter, can be understood or translated as an experience of having a sickness that is incurable, waiting for, or during war, waiting for a beloved's long-awaited return, if the beloved will still come home, being imprisoned for a crime, waiting for arraignment, or getting pregnant and being left by the father of the child, or not being able to quit a really terrible addiction, such powerlessness in the face of drugs, in the experience of sex, for example. Captivity can also come in terms of poverty, of my inability to set myself free, of a failed business, something that is beyond my control, or even in the experience of death, mortality, the loss of a loved one. These are experiences of captivity. And Marcel tells us, in the experience of one's powerlessness, when one is really unable to take charge of one's life, one can only hope. Sometimes in the face of so many suffering, human suffering, in the face of so many unjust structures, or in the face of many decisions made by others, the only appropriate response is hope. The experience of captivity, of one's inability to take charge of oneself, is an experience that stifles. It's an experience that asphyxiates, smothers. It's an experience that prevents one from being whole again and being in charge of oneself, which means that most of the time in the experience of captivity, we are left at the mercy of circumstances and thus utterly forlorn and in despair, because the factors that we respond to or react to seems to be far bigger than us, seems to be more than us. And therefore, the experience of asphyxiation, lacking air, catching up air. Authentic hope, says Marcel, is always situated within the framework of a trial, that there is a trial, and that we are on that trial, or a period of darkness in one's life where the words "I hope" is really nothing but a longing for salvation, a longing for one that breaks us free from the darkness. Nevertheless, despite the desire to overcome, to go beyond this trial or this darkness, hope, if it is to be authentic, remains to be uncalculated and even incalculable, which means something which is just impossible. Hope in this sense is when the soul, the entire person that is involved, no? Ang sangkot dito ay hindi lamang yung isip mo, hindi lamang yung pakiramdam mo. Ang sangkot dito yung buong pagkatao mo. Yung taong umaasa, sinasangkot yung buong sarili. The person who hopes involves his entire self, the totality of his self, not just his feelings, but his thinking, his everything. And turns his soul towards the light, which it does not yet perceive. A light yet to be born, in the hope of being delivered from its present darkness. In that sense, then, hope is a nisus. It's a deep striving. It's a deep striving that does not fixate, but instead opens up. That does not hold on to desires, specific desires, but simply to possibility. Naghahangad ng isang bagay na higit pa sa lahat ng kayang isipin. Hindi napapako sa kung ano lang yung gusto, sa gusto ng sarili, kundi natututong tumingin ng mas higit pa. For Marcel, the more one is tempted to despair, the more is given the chance to respond in authentic hope. Habang numinipis yung mga hinahangad, yung inaasahan, mas lalo raw nabibigyan ang tao ng pagkakataong umasa. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King, he says, "Of hope is born when all is forlorn." Hope is what is not letting things happen the way you want it to happen. Sometimes we call hope our own visions of political order, our own visions of equality, our own visions of what is right and what is wrong. But clearly, that is not hope. But in the face of an ever-growing darkness, in the face of so much uncertainties, so much suffering, so much everything, Marcel reminds us hope is a response to that darkness. It is in this context that we understand what captivity is. Captivity implies that the soul or the self in its totality is really, really deeply involved in the situation. That the situation is not something with no real bearing upon the integrity of the self. That the situation brings to the fore the perils of truly not being ever whole again. Na paminsan umarap tayo sa sitwasyon na alam natin pagkatapos nito, hindi na tayo pwede maging tulad ng dati. When you offend a person, break their trust, things can never be the same. When somebody dies, things will never be the same. And those are experiences of captivity that whatever may happen right now, I will never be the same. Hindi na ako pwedeng maging tulad ng dati. Hindi na siya tulad ng dati. If relationships are like a glass that you drop and it breaks, even if you glue it, it will never be the same. That's the reason why the self, in its essential core, is involved in the process of hoping. And when we say is involved in the process of hoping, then you'd realize that hope can be distinguished from a wish. Why? Because a wish is technically something I am indifferent to. Something that I'm not practically interested with. Something I can be indifferent to. And therefore, something that does not fully or totally involve me. Let's look at some wishes so that we can distinguish a wish from the aspect of hope. I hope that I win in the supermarket raffle or in the lotto. Yes, that's something that is not really connected to my state of being. I hope that September will bring more school holidays. Or I hope that blank drowns in her saliva. Or I hope that the girl in class loves me the way I do love her. I hope that I can move my bowel by tomorrow morning. These are all instances of hope, of a wish. that is often concealed as hope when they're not really hope, no? Why? Because the examples we've just cited, sana pumasa ako sa exam. Sana mawala na yung kahirapan. Sana dumali yung buhay natin. These are instances of diluted hope in which there's really nothing for me to take to heart, to the point of indifference. And thus, it's a mere practical problem of calculability, of probability, and even of feasibility. Ibig sabihin, when you look at the examples that we have presented to you, what's the probability that you will win a supermarket raffle? It's really a question of, did you even start betting or getting into the raffle? Or what's the probability of getting more school holidays on September? Or of your ex drowning, XXX or underline, drowning in her saliva? Or of the girl in class loving you? Or of moving your vowels in the morning? These are all issues and concerns of, as Marcel would say, calculability, probability, and feasibility. Something that you are still in control of. But there is also a popular understanding that hope is really optimism. Optimism is positive thinking. The optimist has a firm conviction or sometimes a vague feeling that things tend to turn out for the best. Always for the best. And hope is not like that, because hope is open to the possibility that maybe not the best can happen to you. At least it's not always the best. And that's something we need to pay attention to. If you hope, it doesn't always mean that what you hope for will be attained, can be attained. Some forms of optimism are actually based on very concrete and practical experiences. Like, for example, when a friend gives an advice on love matters to a heartbroken friend, they'd say, I've seen this before, don't worry about it. Girls are really like that. You'll find someone better who truly deserves you. It's their loss. That's a very optimistic remark, concealed, if you will, as hoping, when obviously it's not hope. Other forms of optimism are actually based on metaphysical or even religious arguments. When you say all is well, God will not forsake us. Why would he? He's supposed to be all good and stuff. That's not hope. That's optimism. So positive thinking is not hoping. To always think that things will be as we've envisioned it is actually how we should envision hoping. The optimist reassesses situations from a distance. Like a game courtside commentator, they talk as if they've already been through what we are going through, as if what we're going through is exactly what they've been through. But that's never the case. They objectify, petrify, and freeze the dynamisms of our life situations and breaks it down and reduces it into objects, into statistics, into numbers, as if what they've been through is exactly what we will go through. Here, the optimist tries his best to explain the situation that we are going through, as if he knows exactly in its totality what we're going through. And therefore, instead of explaining, what we suggest that we go through the darkness. By explaining, we fortify ourselves with the curious comfort gained from telling ourselves that the situation will solve itself even before it's done. That's not hope. The refusal to go through one's darkness, the refusal to go through one's life experiences and allow it to change you by simply allowing yourself to be consoled by the fact that things will be okay, even when they will not be okay. Hope is a response of positive non-acceptance. We'll dissect positive non-acceptance in a bit, but hope is the act by which the temptation to despair is overcome. And how do we overcome despair? Well, by means of positive non-acceptance. So, the pessimist is just the opposite of the optimist. If the optimist thinks that everything will be okay, the pessimist, on the other hand, will always say things will be bad, things will be worse, things will not fall in place. No, the negative thinker is the pessimist. The positive thinker is the optimist, but neither are both hope. In the pessimistic understanding, in the experience of despair, the experience of brokenness, or in the experience of things falling out of place, the self can really capitulate or go to pieces under a given sentence. This is a way wherein we disarm before the inevitable to be fascinated, in fact, to be in love with the idea of our own destruction. Capitulation happens when, in the face of life's difficulty, we concede to it by helping life's difficulty destroy us more. In simple terms, many of us, when we have a problem, resort to drinking alcohol, for example. The mode or the act of drinking alcohol is or are moments of capitulation. Kasi nga, may problema ka na nga, iinom mo pa. So, depressant. Diba? Capitulation is different from acceptance. Why? Because instead of accepting the difficulty, capitulation contributes to the idea of our own destruction. By conceding to our own destruction, no? In short, self-harm tendencies, the tendency to think that by doing this or doing that, we will in fact help ourselves when we won't, while we can't. Acceptance is a passive act of resignation that allows the self to be swallowed by the external circumstances that threatens to destroy it. That's a mode of capitulation. Remember, hope is a positive non-acceptance. So if you're accepting everything, you just accept everything passively. Bring it on type, no? That's basically what a stoic is, no? Although admirable, the stoic remains imprisoned within himself. He does not radiate. That's the reason why hope is not stoicism also. So that capitulation is really participating in one's destruction. Acceptance is passively accepting one's destruction. Authentic hope is a non-acceptance. And when we say non-acceptance, this is the refusal to give in to the darkness, or an insistence that the darkness will not have the last say. So non-acceptance simply means, yes, I'm going through something difficult. Yes, there's something that is happening to me. And yes, also, no, I'm not gonna simply participate and allow that to destroy myself. Neither is this also participating in my own destruction. Positive non-acceptance, negative non-acceptance is a revolt. When you do not accept, but you do so negatively, that's a mode of fighting, of stiffening, of being impatient. One that puts the self in the center. One that acts in response to desperation. Negative non-acceptance yung parang laging kailangang meron kang patunayan. Yung nakikipaglaban ka kasi may pinaglalaban ka. Kaya dahil doon, lagi ka nagmamatigas. Lagi ka nagmamadali. Hindi ka makontento sa panahon, sa ritmo. Gusto mo mangyari na kung anong gusto mo. Parang spoiled brat. Kasi sa sentro ng lahat, sarili pa rin. Kaya, nawawalan ng pag-asa. Kasi sarili ang nasa sentro. Sarili lang yung lumalaban. Diba? You can just imagine someone who is sick of cancer and fights it. Yes, negatively though. And therefore, you'd see why it becomes an issue. Positive non-acceptance, on the other hand, involves patience. Patience. Why? Because things are not centered in oneself. This is not about you or who you are related to. Your wife, your husband, your family, your friends. Hindi lang to tungkol sa sarili mo na dapat ikaw lagi nasa sentro, bida. Positive non-acceptance recognizes that we all have personal rhythms in the process of hope. There is an openness to the situation, openness to possibilities, which also constitutes a blend of patience and of trust. Hope, therefore, means first accepting the trial as an integral part of the self. which means recognizing that I'm going through something and that as I go through this something, I know my very self is at risk. That this is not just one part of myself, but my very self. And at the same time, considers it as destined to be absorbed and transmuted by the inner workings of a certain creative process. Nagbabago ang tao. Nagbabago ang panahon. Hindi parehas yung pagkakilala mo sa tao nung 2015, sa 2010, sa 2020. Nagbabago ang tao. Nagbabago ang tao. So to understand people as if they are unable to change is to not be patient. But consider the patience that we often show with others, our boyfriend, our girlfriends, our parents, our children. Why can they change while others cannot? That's why there are always two ways of saying ganyan talaga ang buhay. The first one is the stoic way, ganyan talaga ang buhay, tanggapin na natin. Or ganyan talaga ang buhay, hayaan nating baguhin tayo nito. Which basically tells you, it's not because you've understood, it's not because people did something to you that they are already unable to change. Unchangeable. And here we see despair. Despair is a capitulation and an act of repetition. Despair yan. Yung iniisip mo na yung tao hindi na pwedeng magbago. Ganyan na talaga yan. Kahit anong gawin natin, mamaya bukas forever ng ganyan yan. Despair. Despair is spiritual autophagy or self-devouring from the Greek words auto, self, and phagein, eat. When we look at people and see them as unable to change, that's despairing. Despair turns towards the ego and see, sikat na naman yung sarili dito. May kilala ako, gusto niya lagi nasa sentro siya ng atensyon. Sikat siya. Gusto niya bida parate. Bukas sa posibilidad ng despair. Making it the center, closing it off from possibilities, trapping oneself up in darkness. Marcel explains that the threat of despair grows the more one is fixated in a specific outcome. Hanggat pinipilit mo kung ano yung gusto mong mangyari, na ito lang yung posibleng mangyari o dapat mangyari, di ba? Pag ipipilit mo talaga kung ano lang yung gusto mo, kasi yun lang yung gusto mo, tapos tayo dyan. There is no possibility, there's no opportunity, there is no space for hope. There's just no space for it. Hope is a process of gradually releasing oneself from the fixation on the object of hope. Kailangan palayain ng sarili, yung sarili sa inaasahan. Pag-asa yun. Yung bukas ka sa posibilidad, hindi sarado. That's why the movement is from I hope that to simply I hope, period. Because when you say I hope that, tatatat, 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 you are fixated on an object of hope, on a desired object of hope. There is absolute confidence in hope. As such, it is not limited to a fixed, identified, calculable, or even possible outcome. So that absolute confidence that is beyond a desired outcome is important for hope to be hope. Hope is creative. As such, it is open to what can be, even if it has yet to see the how. That's how creative it is. It's open to that possibility. And here we have to distinguish physis and fatum. Nature or fate. Despair has a sense of time that is closed. Kaya dapat may patunayan. Kaya dapat laging bida. Kasi mamamatay ako. Kasi pag naubos yung panahon ko, wala na. Hindi na. Hope, on the other hand, recognizes that anything may happen in time. Anything. And there we see a very huge distinction between chronos, measured time, catching up, and kairos, the quality of time. Kairos as the quality of time. Internal time, in fact. Sariling ritmo. Sariling panahon ng pagtubo. Sariling galaw. Kairos speaks about the openness of time. Of how every being has its own rhythm and pace for growth. And it's not always the same as ours. It recognizes that redemption comes at the right time, at the opportune time. It is, in other words, very patient, very trusting. Sometimes in the work of compassion or in the work of in the helping profession, we wanted people to be precisely where we are. But that is not possible. Sometimes we need to let them be where they are. Growth begins there too. That's why hope has a memory of the future. This is a very interesting line from Marcel. No? Memory is always a memory of the past. But what is a memory of the future? What does it mean to look at possibilities? What does it mean to be able to see opportunities? What does it mean to see people's growth? For Marcel, hope is always grounded in communion. That I cannot simply hope on my own. That hope is always hope of someone else, in someone else. Hence, and because of such, love is key, or love is very important in understanding hope. Because you cannot hope when there is no love. In the experience of despair, hope is experienced as an act of trusting in another. Which means when things are falling off, it is understood as holding on to another. Hope is therefore not contractual, not obligatory. Hope, like love, does not treat the other as a possession or a thing, but an irreducible other. Yun yung problema kapag sa tingin mo, laging mas angat ka sa iba. Kung laging meron ng paghuhusga sa iba. Sometimes you wonder how people who are arguing for indigenous people, for example, can continue to argue for indigenous people without without justice. It's just unthinkable. Hope is only possible when you look at the other as an other. Irreducible. Gusto mong itrato kang tao, itrato mo rin yung ibang tao. Ganun lang yun. Inauthentic hope views love as a contractual relationship. Inauthentic hope views everything as a give and take. And therefore, or more often than not, a relationship that is based on mistrust, suspicion, on the negative. so that I may be disappointed by my loved one on the level of the contractual, but on the level of communion, I should recognize that my loved one has value that transcends all measurement. To love anybody is to expect something from him, something which can neither be defined nor foreseen. At the same time, to make it possible for him to fulfill this expectation. Ganyan umibig. No, yung may aasahan ka, pero hindi mo siya pinapako sa inaasahan mo sa kanya. At sabay rin naman, hinahayaan siyang tumubo para isabuhay niya yung kanyang posibilidad. To hope is not to expect from, to have something due to me, to count on, to claim, to demand. Again, sarili na naman yan na nasa sentro. That is anti-communion. That is anti-hope. No? Yung may inaasahan ka, mali yun. May problema tayo doon. Love is a gift. And there you see something that's very unique in Marcel. It's not possessive. It's not obsessive. It seeks to do justice to the otherness of the other with whom I am in a relationship with. Love is not clingy. It's not controlling, but freeing. One that respects the otherness of the other. Love wants the other to remain an other to whom I am in a relation to. Like hope, love is therefore non-calculative, hindi nagbibilang, non-objectifying, but rather is patient and trusting. Patient and trusting. I hope in thee for us. Against the temptation to despair and the temptation to reject hope based on empiricism. So, laging may tentasyon na mawalan ng pag-asa. Laging may tentasyon kasi mas totoo yung kawalang-walang pag-asa kaysa sa umasa. Mas totoo, mas nakikita, mas nararanasan yung wala talagang dahilan para umasa. But there's only one remedy. Isa lang. Sagot dyan. Umaasa ako sa iyo para sa amin. Let's dissect this sentence, I hope indeed for us, by beginning with for us. In every experience of captivity, what is truly ultimately threatened is the bond or communion of love. Yan talaga yung nasisira. Even if a situation concerns only myself, what I fear is my own severance from love, which keeps myself together. Yan talaga yung kinatatakutan ko, yung posibilidad na masira yung sarili ko. Hindi. The Tao or the Holy is seen as that which holds these bonds together. Hindi kayang kunin ng pagsaksak ng oxytocin o kung anumang love hormones para ibigin kita. Nauunawaan ko na may mga bagay na masigit pa sa akin at yung mga bagay na masigit pa sa akin, yun ang bumubuo sa atin. Kaya nga lagi ko binibigay yung imagery ng balon, the imagery of the well. Kasi kahit na iba't iba tayong balon, sa pinakahuli, pag pumasok ka sa balon ng ating sarili, makikita mo nahuhulog lang tayo sa iisang balon. Iisang balon. I hope in to hope is to open myself to the mystery of that communion. The communion of myself with others, bound by the holy, and to trust that in the communion lies the power to restore in a renewed way. Babaguhin sa isang kakaibang pamamaraan, in a renewed way, what was lost, especially in my moment of captivity. Kahit sa aking paghawak sa siyang masigit pa sa akin, binubukas nito yung posibilidad na baguhin ako sa isang pamamaraan yun, mahalaga yun. Hope then is both a return, nostos, and a renewal, kainon ti. Isang pagbalik, pag-uwi, nostos, nostalgia, sa isang bagay na luma, sabay bago pa rin. Kainon ti. As before, tulad ng dati, pero iba, mas higit sa dati. A return to being, but in a transfigured way. As before, but differently, and better than before. A return to being, but in a transfigured way. That's why hope in the face of death, we may say, is a most profound form of hope. It says to the beloved, you shall not die. And our communion is indestructible. And somehow, in some way, I will see you again. Yun, mahalaga yun. Yung alam mo, darating yung panahon, magkikita tayo muli. Na hindi ito yun. Hindi ito yung huli. Meron pa. Meron pa. Yun, mahalaga. The person who knows, who hopes, does not actually know how this will happen. So don't explain how this will happen. He also knows that he cannot make it happen. What to hope for? He does not have the power to make the communion leave, and therefore cannot make it happen just like that. Nevertheless, the person who hopes in the holy. That somehow, in some way, the communion will be restored. The communion will be renewed. Paano? Di alam. Hope is therefore made possible through faith in the Holy, who is the ground of all communion. Ano yan? Paano yan? Pananampalataya. Pananam, pagtikim. Palataya, kung paano magsugal. Hindi natin alam kung mananalo ka o matatalo ka sa sugal. Umaasa ka lang. This ends this lecture on hope from Gabriel Marcel's Phenomenology and Metaphysics of Hope. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe the YouTube channel Samo't sa Simula to keep these lectures ongoing. Thank you very much for your attention.